making incorrect statements thinking it was here and it's passed out and it's going back out. That's ridiculous. When and here's where people can estimate not only the speed but the rate of acceleration. And if you're good at differential calculus, you might be able to figure this out. If we know the direction it's coming, we know that it broke the outer heliosphere of the solar system and broke through the plasma layer, the positive plasma layer out at the Oort cloud in the fall of 2005. And we're now 5 years later. It may give us an idea of the relative speed of this object, especially if it's speeding up on a trajectory. It'll give us an estimate of the rate of acceleration, and it'll also give us an idea of the direction that there's mass ejection. So it'll tell us in which season and which part of the Earth is exposed to the solar mass ejection that'll cause the most earthquakes, the most damage to the ocean, and the most likely triggering events of superquakes in that particular zone of the Earth.
Okay. But the amateur astronomers are going to be onto this within 12 months, aren't they? Surely they have
Well,
to.
they're going to, if they hear what I'm saying today, hopefully what they'll do is the amateur astronomers will get back to me and want to come on the show and on your show, and they'll start putting together models and doing blogs and saying, hey, we took this model, and it's based on a whole lot of different people. We've got Larry Joseph. We've got scientists at the Johannesburg Magnetic Research Center. We've got Russian scientists that have done a ton of work on this that I've talked to Larry and other experts about. I've got my sources from the South Pole Telescope, SOHO. I've been very skeptical. I've got all the way back to Mark Underwood and his book about Planet X back and thinking it was going to come by in 2003. And he said, yeah, I was wrong and didn't that. He wasn't a scientist, but he knew it was coming because he looked at all elements. And if you look at the ancient records, the object that came by that triggered off the Santorini super volcano explosion that caused the plagues over Egypt, it was the same object.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Now, we didn't have the pole slip then because it occurred 3,600 years ago. But now we've got a convergence of two major events. We've got this returning dwarf star and a precession of the equinox that occurs half of 23,000 years or 11,500 years with a magnetic pole slip that's going to be a convergence of two really big events.
Yeah.
And that's what we have solar things that are going to, because it's plasma, and plasma discharges and perturbations of our magnetic sphere, and the trajectory will tell us what season, what sector of the sky, which part of the Earth is exposed, which area is the area of danger. This model will allow people to challenge it and say, look, if this is correct, and again, this one here, the Y satellite, is going to tell us a lot. It'll tell us a lot if they'll release the information. The problem is we need to press them with freedom of information to say, this is putting humanity in danger. If, for example, we were to know that it was going to affect a certain area or quadrant of the Earth, we would want to do mass evacuations before it happened. If we were to know that it was going to cause a tsunami and we had monitoring events, and here's one of the monitoring things that I know about that's classified, okay, and a lot of people get ticked off when I say classified stuff. We have a system that was developed back in the 1950s called torsional vortex imaging, and they basically call it gravitonic imaging, but it's when you have a gravity wave, it perturbs the magnetic flux lines, right?
Right.
And they found a way of imaging the magnetic flux lines so you could see if a submarine was 2 or 3 miles below the Pacific Ocean. So if the Russians had a stealth sub loaded with continental submarine-launched nuclear missiles, you could see it because you could see its perturbation of the magnetic flux lines.
So it's a way of detecting massive objects, basically, is what you're saying.
Right. So you could see, and they can actually tell the shape of it. So depending on a catalog of objects that they've done this before, their little supercomputers can say object identified as Tupolev, Poseidon class submarine, Russian, whatever, RU-415. In other words, they can actually come right down to tell you the class of submarine and which nation it's likely coming from.
Okay.
All right. They also have
it's got its own fingerprint, is what you're saying.
Right. They also use torsional vortex imaging because they can see right through the Earth. They can not only have mapped out in 4 dimensions, not just 3, 4. They mapped out where all the minerals are, all the radioisotopes, all the iron, all the diamonds, all the underground, under tectonic plate oceans of water and methane gas. Everything is mapped out. They have a supercomputer model of every single resource on the planet, right down to the meat.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
They know where everything is. So this idea where you got a shortage of energy is pure hogwash. You could have a wave. One of the most powerful ways to generate electricity, for example, is just a wave generator. And I knew about the guy that actually had one, and he sent me the patent, and within 2 weeks of sending me the patent 3 years ago, he died. Right? So the fact is that we have tons of technology, zero-point energy, nuclear fusion, tokamak nuclear fusion reactors. In fact, the mining operation on the moon, the primary operation is helium-3 to create tokamak reactors that are our primary means of propulsion for interstellar travel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's what we use. We use helium-3. It's a nuclear fusion reactor. It's totally clean, no radiation at all, and it creates what's called a plasma field. And what they do is the vehicle is pulled forward because they warp space-time. That's how they work. They warp space-time, they create a gravitational well, and the vehicle falls into that well.
It's always falling into the hole. Yes, I know.
It's always falling into a hole. It's creating, it's not pushing it from behind, it's following into a gravitational well called electrogravitonics, and they warp space-time, so it also pushes aside particles, including interstellar particles and debris that would otherwise perforate through the craft and kill everybody in it, including what's called zeta particles, and most people aren't aware of zeta. Zeta particles is what the astronauts saw when they went to the moon, because they're, the tin can they put up to the moon. They could see these particles whipping through, and they thought, why am I seeing flashes of light? And it's because the zeta particles were hitting their rods and cones in their eyes, and they caused photon release that would go to the bipolar cells in the back of their eye and through their retina, their fovea, and go to their optic cortex. And they thought, gee, I'm seeing a flash. It's because it was a zeta particle from cosmic radiation hitting the back of their eye.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, gotcha.
So all these things are beyond. See, human beings are the most amazing creature. We're not a terrestrial creature. We're a hyperdimensional creature. We actually have 9 bodies, and I'll explain. Of course, this is something that some of the, quote, 8 great avatars. So the 9 bodies are our 5th dimensional body, which is our, if you want to call it our body of chaos. It's the one that exists in this physical level. I call our worm, our physical presence, our pod for interfacing with, the world. And then there's a body for each level of what I call the spiritual realm. So there's 7 dimensions there. So you have 7 spirit bodies. And then the highest dimension is called the eternal now. So you have an eternal body. And not everyone has achieved that. And so in other words, when people say they have an eternal soul, it's not true. They're trying to rise to that level where they have an eternal body. You follow me?
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the only way to achieve that is when your spirit bodies fuse with the Creator's will, and you create that body. You literally get resurrected, and you become a spirit person. So there's literally simultaneous existence on these different planes. You exist in the physical plane, which is mentioned our 5 dimensions, the pentagram, the 5 lower dimensions of chaos, which include, up, down, left, right, then space-time, and then warp space-time. And the best description of space-time is actually the magnetic flux field of a magnet. If you take a flux field of a magnet, when you take the 2 magnets, the space actually collapses between the 2 magnets as you bring it together, and it's closer than the physical distance you moved it. And the mass of the magnets increases. So gravity is nonlinear space mass conversion, and magnetism is linear space mass conversion. Does that make sense?
Okay, I got you. All right.
So it's very simple, but this explains it. Now, that's why the mass of a galaxy, there's always a percentage that's always the same in all galaxies. That's the black hole of the galaxy. And as matter enters it, it emerges in the stars and in the planets. So the planets aren't created out of nothing. They're created because there's an energy vortex, a spinning spiral of flux lines that accrete or pull together mass to make planets and like Jupiter and Earth, etc. In other words, it's the energy fields that literally create and accrete the matter into a planet and a star into a star. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah. Okay.
In other words, the energy vortices actually accrete the matter and create it, and the white holes have matter mass that reemerges from the center of the galaxy that accretes and forms the stars.
Yep. Okay.
The opposite of what people hear. They think that they just accrete the gas clouds, and they don't. They're spinning vortices of space-time that literally accrete matter, and that's how they form. So I'm telling people things that a lot of modern scientists don't know this, but this is something they'll prove later is true. Okay? Now, mankind is in what's called a zero-order civilization. We're like in the crib. We're in the uterus. There's near 7 billion souls in this uterus now at this point in space-time, and we are trying to, as a corporate civilization, there is an overseeing body of civilizations. And the best way to describe them, they exist at a higher plane called the spirit or hyperdimensional planes.